It's better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. Better to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. What are you saying right there?
I'll answer the question. You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
That's it! Yes! Better to hear the truth you need, than the empty words you want. That's it. 5-second rule. All right, it is good to be back, guys. We are going to continue our study in Ecclesiastes, and we are still in Ecclesiastes chapter 7. But before we do that, just want to ask a couple of pondering questions, kind of set us up for our lesson today. The first one is, what is the most helpful thing that has ever been said to you? What's the most helpful thing that has ever been said to you? Maybe the best piece of advice or even correction that you have received. So I want you to think about that question, right? Anybody?
Oh, hey. Mama always said, never leave your house without clean underwear.
And here would be your second one to think about. What is the nicest thing that has ever been said to you? The nicest thing that's ever been said to you, favorite compliment that you have received. So that'd be the second question. So go ahead and think about that.
Someone once told me I look really good from afar.
One of the things that is funny as we think about that, by nature, we tend to want to hear what is positive. The things that we want to hear, we tend to draw those as our favorite, as opposed to, and Solomon is going to unpack today, that oftentimes the better is what we need to hear, but what we need to hear is not always positive. Oftentimes it is corrective. So we're going to get into that in just a second. But before we do that, let's kind of wrap up or kind of recap what we did last week. Before we get into today's message, right? Solomon, if you remember last week, transitioned from the first 6 chapters where he was doing a lot of telling. He was telling us what he had done. He was telling us what he had seen. He was telling us why life under the sun was meaningless. But last week in chapter 7, we noticed that he had transitioned from telling, and now he was sharing. He was sharing advice. He was sharing insight. He was sharing wisdom, which should change the way we see life's events. It should make us see things under the sun differently. Solomon last week urged us to change the way we view ourselves. Our external, our outside, is not as important, if you remember, as our internal, right? Our inside, how our character, our good name was far more important and valuable than precious ointment, our appearance. We talked and I asked you, who's someone who's been really impactful on your life? And we think about what makes them impactful, and it's not how they look. It's who they are. Solomon, remember last week, then says something that at first seemed like, whoa, that seems crazy. The day of death is better than the day of birth. But sure enough, when we have Jesus Christ, that begins to make sense. Solomon did not say that the day of birth was bad or a negative event, because life is good. It is a gift from God. And Jesus said that I came that you would have life and have it to the full, have an abundant life. Solomon reminds us that the day of birth is good. It's great. It is an awesome event. But that the day of death is better. How? Why? Well, last week we learned because when you belong to Jesus, the day of death is the beginning of life in heaven. In his presence, fully right? Enjoying his promises with perfect bodies and perfect senses, ruling and reigning with Jesus forever in a place that he has gone to prepare for you. It's got to be better, doesn't it? It's better. Not chubby little angels floating in clouds playing harps. That would be lame. Now, this is so much better. Solomon is trying to help us live life today, enjoy life now, to not wish away or waste away a precious moment, but to do so realizing that we live life today so that we will be ready and prepared for everything that God has in store for us later in heaven. Truth. Not everyone is going to heaven, boys and girls. If you do not know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, if he is not your King, if you're not following him, if you're not a child of God, you're not going to heaven. But everyone who goes to heaven, well, they're going to find heaven to be way enjoyable. It's going to be the best thing ever. Heaven is going to be the best thing ever for everybody, yes. However, heaven will not be the same for everyone. The Bible talks about treasures and gifts, rewards and crowns that will be given to us later by Jesus based on how we live now for Jesus. Solomon is trying to help us see that with Jesus, the end of this temporary life ends well. There is a happily ever after when you know Jesus and have given your life to Jesus. When you are no longer living life under the S-U-N Son, but living life with and for the S-O-N God's Son. All right, so let's move on. We're going to get into Ecclesiastes. We are still in 7, and we are going to start, if you get your Bibles out, verses 2 through 6. So here we go. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, and by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of the fool is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity. So that's verses 2 through 6. So let's begin to unpack that a bit. Solomon again is sharing insight on how to live life. And once again, he reminds us that what we need is not always what we want. He encourages us to change our perspective, to seek the truth, right? To handle the truth. Because it is the truth that sets us free. But oftentimes, the truth that we need is not what we want to hear. In the first 6 chapters, Solomon repeats the words vanity over and over again. But in chapter 7, again, as he goes from telling to sharing, he now begins to use the word better over and over again. What he's trying to do is share with us what is better. Notice he's not saying that one is bad. No, he's just saying that there is something better. So verse 2 starts off about the house of mourning is better.
Oh, I know what the bro's trying to say. My house is better in the morning because a great night's sleep, hot shower, and my favorite breakfast, Pop-Tarts!
I appreciate that insight, but what I believe Solomon is saying here is that everyone loves the house of feasting, right? That everybody loves a party. I think we would all...
PC, you got that right. It's presents. Games. Yes, girlfriend.
Yes, but here's what he wants us to understand. It's not that a party's bad. Again, it's not that it's bad, but there is something better for us than a party.
A party that lasts for the whole weekend.
Yeah, no. Here's what I believe he's trying to say to us. That situations that cause us sorrow and grief, things that cause us to make changes, to reflect, to press into Jesus, that those things are helpful and are actually better for us. See, parties are fun and we should enjoy them. Yes. And again, notice Solomon did not say that the house of feasting was bad. The parties or good times are bad. He's not saying that at all. But what he is saying is that a party does not change us and does not make us better, like the house of mourning can. Lessons are rarely learned at a party because we don't become better people at a party. Let's look at some Bible verses. I've got James 1, 2 through 4. Consider it joy, pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Then there's 1 Peter 2, 20 and 21. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow his steps. 1 Peter 4:13. But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. Notice those verses clearly are not talking about the house of feasting, but would describe events that you would find in the house of mourning. Success is fun, yes, and it builds confidence. But boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, failure is oftentimes where we learn and grow. God works through those circumstances for his glory and for his purposes. Solomon is encouraging us to not look for the easy way and to not be afraid to fail, to embrace life's difficult moments, to learn from them, to enjoy life's great moments and parties. Absolutely yes. But remember that a party is not the same as God's blessings. I'm going to say that again. A party, good times, that is not the same as God's blessings. Enjoy life when it is going well. Enjoy it and celebrate and give God thanks. But remember to embrace life's difficult moments, to let sorrow and grief strengthen you and mold you into the person God has called you to be. There's a saying when you work out, no pain, no gain. And this is really what it's saying, is that muscles will not grow unless they are under resistance. It's the resistance that makes those muscles grow and become stronger. And what Solomon is saying, that same concept for our physical strength is also a spiritual strength. And that is resistance that makes our faith and character grow and become stronger spiritually. So let's go to verse 8. And verse 8 says, better is the end of a thing than its beginning. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning. So who thinks they know what Solomon is trying to share with us in this verse? Any takers on that? Any help there?
I think he's talking about a bad movie, because the end is better than the beginning. No more misery.
All right. Yeah, let's, I believe, again, I appreciate your thoughts. Solomon, I think, is sharing some helpful insight here. And what he has noticed is this, that it is really easy to start something. I think if we're all honest, a lot of us have started projects. We start them, but here's the deal. Many of the things we start, guess what? They never get completed. They never get completed. How much enjoyment and satisfaction comes from an incomplete project? Really not much. But a successfully completed project, a finished project, brings great enjoyment and brings great satisfaction. Better than better than a great idea is a great idea that has been what? Implemented. A great idea that has become reality. And so what Solomon is saying is at the ending is better than the beginning. So often we never get to that, and it's at the end of something, the fulfillment of something, that you find your enjoyment and your pleasure. So we're going to skip down to verse 29, and we're going to end today's lessons right there. Again, you guys can read on your own, journal on your own, meditate on your own. But we're going to go to verse 29. Here's how he ends chapter 7. See, this alone I found, that God made man upright. I'm going to say that again, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. All right, so God made man upright, but men have sought after schemes. What is Solomon trying to say to us here at the end of chapter 7?
Upright. Like we were made standing. We didn't evolve from anything. Not a single. Did somebody say single? I'm single.
All right. Well, I appreciate the so a couple things. First, single. Until you are ready to get married, single, ladies and gentlemen, is a great place to be. Now, back to the question, I do appreciate the thought that what God was saying there, what Solomon is saying is that man being made upright is kind of a reference that we were created in God's image, that we did not evolve. I think that's good insight. But what I believe Solomon is trying to share here is the truth that what God made was upright. That man's issues and problems are not because of God, but because the man does what? Seeks after his schemes, seeks after foolishness. Solomon has noticed that life under the sun, when things go wrong, our first response is often to what? To blame God. Why God? Right? Why God? When sickness and death occurs, when trials and tribulations occur, what do we say? Why God? When life is hard, why God? Is it so hard sometimes? Why God does life seem so unfair at times? Why God is this happening? We blame God. And Solomon's saying, wait a second, man was made upright. So let's look at some verses. John 16:33. Jesus told us that we would face trials and tribulations. In James 1:2-4, we are told that our trials and tribulations, again, we talked about this earlier, are used to strengthen our faith, to build us up. So Solomon wants us to see that God is not the question, but rather God is the answer. Instead of judging God or questioning God or blaming God, we should be running to God, embracing God, and clinging to God. Because life is filled with trials and tribulations is the very reason why God is so necessary. Why we need him. Why we need him to forgive us. Why we need him to save us. Why we need him to redeem us. Why we need him to help us. The truth is that the world God created was good. The book of Genesis tells us that it was very good. God made man upright. And it is because of man's rebellion, his disobedience, man's sin and evil, with all of its pain and difficulties, are now able to operate here in the world. So let's look here. John 16:33 again goes on to tell us that Jesus has overcome all our trials and tribulations. 1 Peter 1:6-7, we are told that our trials and tribulations here are temporary. Remember, life under the sun is temporary. Psalm 35 says that sorrow and sadness may last for the night, but joy comes in the morning. So let's wrap it up right here. Here we go. Get ready to land this. The good news is God has overcome all evil, all pain, and all suffering. Jesus is coming back to rule and reign, to right all that is wrong. God is going to restore the earth and the effects of man's sin will no longer be felt. No longer be felt. But until then, until that day arrives, when trouble does find us, why not? Trust God. Believe God and rest in God. Remember, no matter how bad things may seem, God is never the question. That's what he's saying here at the end of chapter 7. God is never the question. He is always the answer. Sin is why we need God's forgiveness, why there is sickness, and why we need God's healing. Trouble is why we need God's help. So that is the end of chapter 7. Again, my email address. I want to make sure that we are staying connected, so get your parents' permission, but it is chris@mynewbridge.church. Love to hear from you guys, see what's going on. Again, life under the sun. But life with the Son, yeah. So make sure that we are living with Jesus and for Jesus and allow him to change our perspective on life. Guys, have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next time.